Hello everybody, Joanna here. Today I'm going to be talking about the books I finished in May and later go into a might be read TBR. So first of all, I finished The Trouble with Peace by Joe Abercrombie. This is book 2 in the Age of Madness trilogy, and I just had a blast with it. It's hard to talk about without giving away spoilers, but as it says on the back, we're dealing with conspiracy, betrayal, rebellion. Peace is just another kind of battlefield. So I loved this story. I loved the way that this built upon book 1, A Little Hatred, and the way this trilogy so far is building upon the 3 standalones that are available and the original trilogy. Such exciting news, by the way, that we're going to possibly be getting a Best Served Cold adaptation. But anyhow, I think that Abercrombie is such a talented writer. I love little things he does, not only with simile and action scenes, but also with the ways that he contrasts different characters, even just side characters in different locations. And there's one particular female character in this series that I just live for. I just got so excited every time she was on the page. So I adored this, cannot wait to finish this trilogy. And I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan of Joe Abercrombie, of the First Law universe. Fantastic series. Okay, and book 2 I read was Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This was a reread for me. I listened to the audiobook this time, and I actually did a pretty solid review of this book, which I'll link up in the cards if you want to check it out. But just in brief summary here, we have 2 neighboring nations. We have the Kingdom of Denland and the Kingdom of Liscan. And Emily Marshwick, our main character, she's from the nation of Liscan, and she's a noble-born woman. Basically, Liscan goes to war with Denland after Denland revolutionaries kill their king. And so the king of Liscan feels very threatened by this. He doesn't want his monarchy to turn into something else. And so he sends out all the boys and men, creates a draft, sends out his wizards. So there is wizard magic through the king's touch that is used in the battlefield. He sends them out to the swamps to fight the Denlanders. And then later on, as you see when you open up the story, this is not really a spoiler, Emily Marshwick ends up being a soldier in this war. And you see how that affects her over time. And I thought that was so brilliant the way he did that, the way he portrayed the change in a person when they become a soldier, how that affects their identity. And I think that he also brought to life the swamp setting. There were so many interesting, unusual touches here and there. And I have to say that this was a very solid standalone, excellent plot, very satisfying ending. But as a result of the very efficient storytelling, which was perfect for a standalone, I did find there were some places where I just wanted even more, I just wanted things to develop further. But that wouldn't have been really good for a standalone again. So I think that my feelings are pretty much the same in that regard. When I first read this book, I did find I struggled to connect with Emily Marshwick as deeply as I wanted to. I might have connected to her a little bit more on the reread. And I also have to mention that there is a bit of a love triangle in this story. And I know a lot of people are going to groan about love triangles, but it wasn't really the main purpose of the story, in my opinion. It was kind of there, but it served a purpose at the same time. And I just think the plot of this book was brilliant, the way it came together, the way it subverted some gender tropes that we're familiar with possibly, and also just the way that it looked at othering in war and looking at the question, at what point is surrender the more noble cause, as I mentioned in my review, and also just questions about honor and courage and bravery and being a coward. I thought that there were some interesting questions there. Again, so I'm not too redundant, check out the review if you want more information. My thoughts and feelings are pretty much still the same for the most part, but this is a really solid standalone. So glad I reread it. It was good to remember things I had forgotten, and highly recommend if you want a good military fantasy, flintlock fantasy standalone with a fantastic plot. Next one to mention is Elric Saga Volume 2, the first story in that bind-up, which is The Vanishing Tower. And in this particular story, Elric is tortured by his past, by his desires, by his dreams, and he's really grappling with fate and the multiverse, which is there in the Elric world. I loved some of those things. So this is such an imaginative fantasy story. I mean, so many cool, unique sword and sorcery elements, yes, but just ethereal, otherworldly ideas and creatures. And I just thought it was so much fun. At the same time, it's very dark and very tragic. And I love the settings in this particular one as well. I won't say exactly how the Vanishing Tower is the Vanishing Tower because it's really fun to find out. But in this particular story, we get introduced to the city of beggars, which is called Nadsokar, if I'm getting that name right. And so this is a city with giant rats and ghouls, and it has a stink that goes 10 miles out. And then this is contrasted quite a bit by this other city called Tanalorn, which has been mentioned in previous books. I don't know if the other one, the City of Beggars, has been mentioned before. I can't remember if it has. But I know Tanalorn has been mentioned in previous Elric stories. And this particular place is noted for being very beautiful with pastel towers and domes and soft sunlight. It sounds so beautiful. It sounds like a respite from all of the horrors happening in the rest of the world. And it's just fascinating to see this character Elric and how he contrasts the different settings that he's in. And of course, he also contrasts the side characters he's around as well. So this was fun. I had a good time with it. There was a bit of a vengeance quest in this one. And again, so many layers and questions about death and life and the meaning of existence. So if you're in the mood for something that really delves into that existential, nihilistic, dark fantasy tone, then you want to check out Elric. Okay, now the big one for my month of May was my reread of A Feast for Crows. This took me some time to reread. I really took my time with it. I decided that maybe I should just start from now on anthropomorphizing my books and having them tell me how long they want me to read them, or how slowly they want me to read them, how fast they want me to read them. Because sometimes I feel like the best reading experiences happen when you let the book tell you the pace it wants you to take it. So with A Feast for Crows, there were some days where I read several hours a day and I was just totally immersed in the story, and other times when I felt like the book wanted to be slowed down, and it wasn't any less immersive or any less rewarding when I slowed down, but I just found that that was the experience that felt right for those days. And so I trusted that, I honored that. I recently did a video titled What is Optimal Reading, in which I talk about flow experiences in reading. And in that video, I talk about the different components of flow when it comes to reading, things that would lead to or lend themselves to a flow experience when reading. But I also talk about things that could hinder our optimal reading experiences. And one of them is trying to push through a book or trying to work through a TBR. So I tried to take that advice on for myself, like not try to push the reading experience that didn't want to happen in my mind's eye, like letting myself have some leeway. So that was basically what I did with The Feast for Crows. And I found I had the best experience with it. I finished the book and I really didn't feel like I loved it any less than A Storm of Swords. I know that's a very unpopular opinion, but I stand by that. I thought that while A Feast for Crows did not have as many high points, as many climactic moments as Storm of Swords, I still felt like it developed so much and it added so much richness to the world and to the story, which is something that I talked in depth about over on Bend the Knee. I was over on the Bend the Knee podcast with Jimmy and Matt. So I will link that down below in case you want to check that out. But I had a wonderful time discussing that book with them because it was just incredible. And Matt, in that discussion, brought up a really interesting fact, which is if you look at the chapter breakdown of A Feast for Crows, the majority of perspectives in A Feast for Crows are female perspectives. So I found that absolutely fascinating. And I'm super excited to talk about this book later on with my friends in the A Song of Ice and Fire read/reread along 2023, including Joanna Sousa, Alex from Tall Guy Reads, and Scott the Bald Booktuber. It's going to be over on Scott's channel at the end of the month, but it was just amazing. It was amazing to finish that book and have that conversation. So I am just intoxicated on A Song of Ice and Fire right now. It's just been so good. It's been so amazing to reread these books. And then lastly, I'll go ahead and say that I started the Vagabond manga, and this was largely due to, I'll just say, Murphy and Philip. So what happened was when I was doing the flow video editing, I asked Philip if I could use his tennis footage in my video because it just felt appropriate. And he, of course, consented, but also happened to mention that Vagabond has quite a few instances of flow in it. And then Murphy, a few days later after I posted my Flow video, she posted her Vagabond video, spoiler-free video on Vagabond. It was excellent. And she talked about Flow in Vagabond. And I thought, this is really funny and so timely. So I went ahead and picked up the manga, the web version that Philip sent me a link to. And I've been really enjoying it so far. I've only finished about 1.5 volumes, which is probably about halfway through one omnibus edition of 3 volumes. But it's really interesting so far. And it's kind of perfect because it takes place in the late 1500s in Japan. And I just earlier this year read Shogun with some friends by James Clavell. And that particular book takes place in 1599 Japan. So I felt set up knowing a little bit about the Japanese feudal system from Shogun. So I think that set me up pretty nicely. So I'm going to enjoy Vagabond, probably continuing into the month of June. And I'm really grateful for that recommendation. Now to talk about my TBR, which is going to be fairly short and have several carryover books from my previous TBR. And so one of those being The Lions of Al-Rasan. I did not get to this in the month of May, and I really, really want to get to it. This is high on my priority list. The only thing is that I had reasons for needing to push it back, meaning, of course, the read of A Feast for Crows. I think that really took me more time than I was expecting. But also the friends I'm going to be buddy reading that with, including Fantasy Awash and Josh from Red Fury Books. I know both of them needed to push that back on their TBRs as well. So I probably need to touch base with them and find out when they want to buddy read this together. But in any case, I think it's fine if we take different times when we read it and then meet up for a discussion perhaps. And I know Alex from Tall Guy Reads wants to join in that discussion too. I'm also going to be buddy reading, speaking of Alex, The Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. And so I found out about this over from Theo from Rekindled Reader. He gave a wonderful review of this, and I found it that day that I was listening to his wrap up. I found that it was available, the audiobook is available on Scribd. So I have that saved, and I probably will get a physical copy as well. I tried to put a hold on in the library, but I don't think it'll come here in time. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and buy it. This story is about the Battle of Thermopylae, and it's from Xenus's perspective. I'm sorry if I'm getting those pronunciations wrong, but I understand it's an excellent historical fiction book, and so I'm curious enough to check it out. And I also want to finish The Age of Madness with the Wisdom of Crowds if possible. And so that will be something I'm really excited to get to. And I just received an ARC for The Prophet of Idan, which is book 2 in the Way of Idan trilogy. And so I'll be reading that this next month as well. Looking forward to that by Philip Chase. I forgot to mention I picked up the ebook of Half Human Heroes, edited by Jeremy Fee, with the foreword by Philip Chase. And so this is a compilation of short stories by a variety of authors, including several booktubers. And so I'm hoping I could fit in a couple of short stories into my reading plans this year. And I think that's about it. So, A Dance with Dragons will happen at some point. I don't know if I'll start that in June or July, but that will happen at some point, and I will update our schedule for the live shows for that. That live show will actually take place on my channel, and I'm excited for it. I'm very, very excited for A Dance with Dragons. So that is it for now. Please let me know how your month went and what you're reading in the month of June. If you've read any of the books I've mentioned, if you're planning to read any of the books I've mentioned, please let me know that in the comment section down below, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.